What if the Viking myths you've heard weren't myths at all? We often say we know more about Mars than our own planet, but when it comes to our seas, that's no exaggeration. Scientists estimate that less than 0.001% of the deep seafloor has ever been directly explored by humans, a tiny window into an immense unknown. That means most of our ocean floor remains a mystery. Just like the ocean, the Viking mind was filled with unknowns. Ghostly hunts at night, monstrous serpents beneath their ships, undead rising from graves. These weren't just stories. They were ways of explaining what people couldn't understand. The Vikings spoke of Sleipnir with awe. Odin's extraordinary steed, graced not with 4 legs, but 8. With unmatched speed, Sleipnir carried the All-Father not only across earth and sea, but between realms, from Midgard to Hel and beyond. These weren't mere poetic flourishes. On Gotland, runestones like the Chengvida and Ardre 8 depict an 8-legged horse bearing a rider, widely interpreted as Odin himself. One scene even shows a Valkyrie offering a drinking horn, suggesting arrival in the Hall of the Slain. These carvings stick in the mind. They must be deliberate, powerful symbols, a steed so fast only myth could bear it. Behind the myth lies a kernel of real-life significance. Horses stood at the heart of Viking life. Warfare, travel, wealth, status, and played a central role in sacred rites. In sagas like Gylfaginning, Sleipnir is born when Loki, shape-shifted into a mare, is impregnated by the giant stallion Svadilfari. This unlikely pairing results in Sleipnir, the gray 8-legged horse, unique, uncanny, and undeniably mythic. Scholars believe Sleipnir's 8 legs may symbolize superlative speed, a mythic way of speaking that one could outrun time, but also carry deeper meaning, ritual, and shamanic power. Hilda Ellis Davidson interprets Sleipnir as a shaman's steed, a psychopomp enabling the soul's journey between worlds. In this way, the horse connects with other mythic symbols of transition, like the world tree itself. Sleipnir also reflects broader Norse attitudes toward horses. In their myths, horses bore more than riders. They bore messages, souls, and fate. Rune inscriptions and sagas describe ritual sacrifices, funeral feasts, and the belief that a warrior might journey to Valhalla on horseback, Sleipnir serving as both a guide and a symbol of honor. Before we go deeper, if uncovering the truth behind ancient Viking myths sparks something in you, subscribe and join the journey. These stories aren't just legends, they're windows into how people made sense of the strange and powerful world around them. Ready for the next one? In the dark hours of a Viking night, there were stories told in hushed tones, of something stirring in the earth. Not a ghost, not a spirit, but something far worse, something that got back up. They called it the Draugr. This undead being wasn't spectral and drifting, it was solid, heavy, swollen with death. It lived in graves, guarded treasure, and sometimes dragged the living down into the same fate. In sagas like Grettis Saga, warriors would descend into burial mounds to fight these bloated corpses. Battles described with detail so raw they feel like memory, not fantasy. Unlike ghosts from later folklore, Draugr had bodies. They could crush bones, shift into beasts, and walk on land or undersea. They smelled of rot, yet were almost impossible to destroy. And here's where truth and myth blur. Archaeologists digging Viking graves across Scandinavia have discovered some chilling patterns. Corpses with stones laid over their chests, legs bound, mouths sealed. In some cases, iron rods were driven through their torsos or heads, severed entirely. These weren't random customs, they were precautions. Such burial practices, known as apotropaic measures, are found across northern Europe and are meant to prevent the dead from returning. Vikings weren't just honoring the dead, they were protecting themselves from them. Why the fear? It could be the way decomposition works. A dead body buried in a sealed mound can bloat, blacken, and even shift position, gas building, limbs moving. To those who return days or weeks later, the body might seem restless. More than anything, the Draugr myth shows how the Vikings understood the boundary between life and death. In 1335, quarry workers near Klagenfurt, Austria, unearthed an enormous skull, strange, heavy, and unlike any living creature. Locals interpreted it as the skull of a dragon, the fabled Lindworm that lay buried in local myth. Seized by legend, the skull was sculpted atop a nearby fountain in 1590, forever immortalizing the beast in clothed stone. Only centuries later did scientists confirm the skull belonged not to a dragon, but the woolly rhinoceros, an Ice Age giant last seen across Eurasia some 14,000 years ago. This singular fossil ignited a legend. Tales of the Lindworm grew richer and stranger. Swedish folklore described color-dark serpents with horse-like manes, blind victims with a spit of foul milk, and dragging people into rock crevices. These stories manifested in local lore long after the beast had vanished, embodying the awe and fear that petrified bones could inspire. In literary tradition, the Lindworm also appeared in fairy tales. The Danish king Lindworm tells of a half-human, half-snake prince cursed at birth. Only the clever maiden, shedding dresses as she strips the beast's skin, reveals his human form beneath. These stories, far removed from fossils, continued feeding the myth via allegory. They speak less of monsters and more of transformation, redemption, and hidden truth. What does the Lindworm teach us? That myth often grows around misunderstood discovery. A fossil, tangled in centuries of belief, becomes a creature of legend. That statue in Klagenfurt remains not just as a mythic figure, but as perhaps the earliest reconstruction of anything extinct, long before paleontology as we know it existed. So, next time you hear a legend brewing from bone, remember, behind every myth there may lie a fragment of real history, waiting to be uncovered. When the wind howled through the pines and lightning split the sky during the darkest nights of Yule, Norse and Germanic villagers spoke of an unearthly cavalcade, wild, roaring, and rushing past on invisible paths. They called it the Wild Hunt. To hear its approach was to feel the earth tremble. Carts of bone-white horses, spectral riders, and hounding cries tore across the horizon like a storm made flesh. Some whispered that to glimpse it was to court disaster, foretelling war, plague, or worse. Others spoke of the dead being claimed into the hunt's ghostly ranks, dragged screaming into other worlds. Today, scholars see deeper significance in the legend. The Wild Hunt took shape in a liminal time of year, Yule, where darkness and winter made the boundary between life and death thinnest. Folklorist Jacob Grimm, in 1835, grouped these stories into a deep-rooted myth tied to Odin, leader of the Wild Hunt across much of Europe. In the heart of Maori tradition, the Taniwha emerges as a creature both feared and revered, shifting forms from serpent to shark, whale to floating log. These beings are deeply anchored in the natural world, inhabiting pools of river mist, shadowed cave mouths, or the restless seas. In some tales, they ferried voyagers safely across turbulent channels. In others, they emerged as terrifying predators, wielding tail and tooth against those who disturbed their domain. Whether guardian or devourer, Taniwha embodied the tame of natural forces beyond human command. The name itself reveals ancestral roots. Linguists trace Taniwha back to Proto-Oceanic Taniwha, meaning shark species. Across Polynesia, Tonga, Samoa, Niue, the term invokes powerful sea creatures, reinforcing how encounters with real marine life shaped the myth. Taniwha took many forms. Some adopted sinewy, reptilian shapes with spines along their backs. Others mimicked whales, sharks, or even logs that moved unnaturally in rivers. Every evening in Valhalla, Odin's Great Hall, a remarkable ritual unfolds. The honored dead, the Einherjar, gather for supper. Their host? A roasted boar named Sleipnir. What makes this feast extraordinary is that, by morning, Sleipnir is whole again, alive, uncooked, and ready to nourish the warriors once more. In the Prose Edda, the figure of High explains to King Gylfi that the divine cook Andrimnir prepares Sleipnir in the cauldron Eldrimnir nightly. The feast never runs out, for the boar restores himself each dawn, an eternal cycle of sustenance. Similar notions appear elsewhere in Norse lore, such as Thor's goats, which regenerate after being eaten, provided their bones remain unbroken. There's layered symbolism in this myth. While Sleipnir is described as a boar, the name may also mean sooty sea beast, hinting at connections to cooking methods or primal ritual, an idea central to Norse ceremonial practice, where ritual offerings sustain community bonds and cosmic balance. Imagine a society where the gods' hall pulses with nightly feasting, where death and even destruction yields to renewal, and where warriors rise for battle anew. Sleipnir isn't just dinner, he's a symbol of resilience, of nourishment beyond the grave, and of life's persistence in the face of fate. In seasonal rites like the Winter Blot, boar sacrifices were common, perhaps echoing the endless feast of Sleipnir. In that, this myth isn't just storytelling, it's a ritual archetype, suggesting that sacred feasting and cosmic order were inseparable. In the grand tapestry of Norse myth, Sleipnir embodies the hope that what's destroyed can rise again, that strength is restored through sacrifice, and that even in Valhalla, the cycle of life endures. So, I want to hear from you. Which of these myths felt most real? Share your thoughts below. If you're all about uncovering the truth behind the legends, like, subscribe, and hit the Bel, because in every myth, reality waits to be rediscovered.